This is Just a Few Questions. I'm Marc Sims. My guest is Paul Vallas. Paul Vallas is the former CEO of the Chicago Public Schools. And Paul Vallas, you are in charge of the Philadelphia schools and the New Orleans schools, right?
I was post Katrina rebuilding the school district in New Orleans after the disastrous hurricane.
Well, you're the person to talk about public schools, and so let's get right into it. I don't like to talk about current issues so much, but I have to do this one. Paul Vallas, will an elected school board here in the city of Chicago better prepare the average student or the struggling students like yours truly used to be back in the day, prepare students for their post-secondary education?
Well, one would hope so. Although the board they've created is a huge board. It has 20 members and then a chairman. So, one can argue that you have some elected school boards that do extraordinary jobs. You have other elected school boards that struggle. Just as there are advocates who claim that you need a strong mayor to have control over the schools. To keep the schools on the right track. But then on the other hand, you can have a mayor that makes very bad decisions. So at the end of the day, there's no system that is a perfect system. The bottom line is we're going to have a very large elected school board, and that's it. And so it's going to be really important to provide that a board with the type of support that they need and the training that they need that they can be effective, and to make sure that that board has the type of staff resources so that it can make informed decisions. That's going to be critically important too, because there is this tendency in the city to have these boards, or like a case in point, the city council. I mean, one would think that the city council would be this powerful body, but because the city council does not have access to information, there's not a lot of transparency when it comes to sharing information. The city council doesn't have the capacity to really do an effective independent analysis of the city budget and things like that. The mayor tends to dominate. And when you have a good mayor, that might be good, but when you have an ineffective mayor, and that's not so good. So it's really going to be important. We have to live with the system. It's here, and complaining about it or saying that there's better alternatives at this point is all an academic exercise.
I hope people understand because, hey, you're an expert, I'm not. You're dealing with human beings. An elected school board is not going to be perfect. It's going to have its problems. You're dealing with human beings with huge egos, and I just wish they would focus on from the bottom to the top. Will they help the? You can chime in after I say this, and I'll ask you another question. Will they really help the most struggling students?
Yeah, well, it really all depends on the policies. Again, the governing issue, it's always kind of what's the term? Can I use the word crapshoot? It's almost like a gamble. You get good leaders, that's great. You get bad leaders, it's not so great. The bottom line is human nature is the way it is. It's imperfect. So how do you kind of design the system so that it's focusing on the right things? So there's not an easy answer. Let's just hope that through what's going to be really important in this election is that you don't have one entity dominate the election. Look, there's no debate that I have major issues with the current leadership of the Chicago Teachers Union. Just for your listeners who may not know me, I've negotiated successful collective bargaining agreements in four different cities, four different unions. So we've never had a strike. I've always had very effective working relationships. So I'm not in any way, a critic of teacher unions. I'm a critic of the current teacher union leadership. So it's going to be really important that we make sure that teacher union leadership does not dominate the school board. They have a slate of candidates that are going to raise a bunch of money for those candidates, and they want a board that's going to be compliant and that's going to do what they want them to do. Right now you have an appointed board. As you know, the union has issues with the current superintendent, and they're trying to force the mayor, or they and the mayor want to get rid of the current superintendent. But right now the board's holding fast. If you have a board that's controlled by the school, lock, stock, and barrel, that's not necessarily a good thing. So you're going to need a balance. So what's really going to be important in the elected school board elections is that we look for candidates that are going to demonstrate their independence, that are going to demonstrate that they're not dominated by the special interests. I think that's what, I mean, democracy only works when you really have competition, when you really have choice. So it's going to be really important to make sure that that there are candidates running who are going to put the priorities of educating children first over the priorities of, the special interests. And sometimes the teachers union can be a special interest, and when they're focusing on things like increasing membership, increasing benefits, undermining accountability, placing job protections over the ability of schools to make changes that improve themselves, that can be a negative effect. So if you want to know how we can ensure that we have a quality school board, I think the first step is to make sure that we're supporting candidates that have a clear agenda that places the kids first and not special interests.
Well, Paul Vallas, my second question is sort of like the first one. How can the public schools prevent? Because I'm a resident of Chicago. I don't plan on leaving. Let's say that. How does the public schools prevent a student from becoming a neighborhood criminal?
I think there are some fundamental things that the schools can do now that can be transformational. So let's look at the back end. Let's look at high schools. I've been a strong advocate, and in Chicago we had a very expensive program that helped students find work while they were going to school. It was called work study. The objective here was when a student enters school, a student can be introduced into the real work world by being provided work study internships, the opportunity to have internships with businesses, internships with governmental agencies, internships and apprenticeships with the trades. It's like Crystal Ray. Crystal Ray is an inner city high school founded in Chicago. There are now 35. It was founded by the Jesuits. It's an independent school. It's founded by the Jesuit order, and all the kids work while they go to school. The Crystal Ray, you can Google Crystal Ray. They're extraordinary. They have like 98, 99% graduation rates. They are overwhelmingly minority and low income, because that's the population that they target. Yet they're extraordinarily successful. There's a high that type of model, I think, needs to be institutionalized across the city. So when you enter high school, you are obviously being exposed and subjective and put through a core curriculum that's designed to give you college as an option, but college is not going to be for everyone. And children who go to college need to be placed in an environment where they're introduced to the work world, where they're surrounded by working men and women who incidentally are the best role models in the community, and where they have an opportunity to participate in a paid work study job. Right now, I'm running a foundation. It's called the John McKenzie Foundation, and your readers can Google Michael Johnson Dane County Boys and Girls Clubs, because the Boys and Girls Clubs are a big partner, but we're basically in the process of opening schools. In this case, it'll probably be either a state or a city, a school district, a sponsored charter school, where the kids go to work while they go to high school. And in their junior and senior year, they're actually participating in paid work study. So that'll prepare kids for the work world. It'll put them in a safe, secure environment. It will surround them by working men and women, and it will put money in their pocket. And those type of things will keep kids in school, and it'll really best prepare them for the real world.
See, we're almost done. My thing is, like, when I hear the CTU, I'm not saying what they're doing is wrong, and I'm against it, but they really don't talk about the real core. Like I'm like a lot of people live in the city of Chicago. Mayor does, CTU president does, but no one really talk about how we stop the crime. And a lot of the crime is African Americans are hurting other African Americans. Right. A lot of African American women are the victims of crime, usually perpetrated because we all live in the same neighborhood, that kind of stuff. We run into similar networks. That the criminals are black men, are young black men, and I don't see them saying we're going to. I know what we're doing is indirectly trying to stop the crime, but I'm saying no. let's stop it now. And I don't really see the vigorousness, maybe because they make over 200 grand a year. Maybe they disconnected. I don't
Right.
know them. But what I'm saying though is that I don't see the effort to say, for once and for all, Chicago, the city of Chicago, is not going to be known for crime.
Well, look, let me just say that it's critically important that high schools break out of the mold of kind of the old, industrial economic system type high schools, so that we're moving beyond just providing students with the same type of academic approach. You have your core courses, you have your electives, etc. This industrial model of public education needs to be transformed, and I believe that things like universal work study will keep the kids in school. It'll keep them off the street. It'll keep these young people exposed to the work world by having internships with government agencies, the private sector, the trades, etc. And it'll expose kids to the role models they need to be exposed to, and it'll give them an opportunity to begin to earn some money. It'll put money in their pocket, so to speak, which is, I think, critically important too, because young people are just exposed to all these material things on social media and in the advertising and things like that. And so the bottom line is, I think that can be a really positive thing. But the unions will never let that happen. The problem with the problem fundamentally with the current Chicago Teachers Union leadership is they will not allow the schools to make any changes that impact their members, their salary, their benefits, their work world, their work schedule, or for that matter, that will change their job responsibilities. The school day, we have the shortest school day and shortest school year in the industrial world. At the end of the day, why aren't schools open till 8 o'clock at night? Why aren't they open on weekends? Why aren't they open through the summer? Why don't we have a year-round school so we have kids off the street and constructively engaged? And that's not happening. In Chicago from 1995 to 2000 2000 and I think it was 2003, 2004, the murder rate in the city dropped from almost 1,000 to just above 400. Now, what happened during that period of time? Besides the fact that we had enough police officers, so we had real community policing, so that 911 calls were being responded to in a matter of minutes. Last year, half the 911 calls did not have enough police officers to respond to them. High priority 911 calls, half of those calls, 240,000, did not have a police car available to respond when those calls came in. Incidentally, that's why ShotSpotter was so important, because it could allow the police to obviously prioritize which calls were most important because they have limited resources. But the other thing that led to a transformation was school campuses were open through the dinner hour, on weekends, over the summer, on holidays. Even when we had snow days, we kept the campuses open so the kids had somewhere to go. So the schools have got to get in. They have got to get engaged. They have got to have the type of school-based activities so we can keep the kids not only off the street, in schools. Remember, this is a union that has struck, 3 times in the last 10 years, that has threatened to strike dozens more times, and that shut down for 78 consecutive weeks in defiance of their contract. They shut down by 78 consecutive weeks during COVID, long after the CDC and the experience of schools that had reopened, have demonstrated that COVID was not a threat to school children. The Catholic schools, incidentally, never closed, and they didn't lose students, they didn't lose enrollment, they gained enrollment nationally, and the kids did not lose any of their academic, they continue to make academic progress. In fact, they exceeded their academic goals. So shutting down this system, during that shutdown, incidentally, the district's enrollment dropped 38,000. The teachers union.
That's happened. That's happened a lot across the country. But let me forgive me for cutting you off.
No, that's
the show is almost over. But before the show is over, one more question. I got to say this. You're in your 70s. It's easy for you to go find a rocking chair and just chill out. Why do you keep going?
Oh, well, I don't know. My mother teases me. She says I'm a child before Ritalin. So I've always been kind of this like hyperactive child, having to work on things, doing things, trying to stay active. Look, I'm a lifelong public servant, and I've always viewed myself as being a problem solver. I didn't run for mayor because it was on my bucket list. I ran for mayor because there were problems that I felt I could solve, and I had ideas on how to address the city's critical issues. I think that's the reason I write as many op-eds as I do in the Tribune and Illinois Policy, and even City Journal New York. I'm a regular contributor because there are problems out there that there are real solutions to the problems that are out there. If people will just stop for a moment, be open, not divisive, be willing to take advice. Because right now, the politics seems to be so polarized. People aren't looking for solutions, and it seems that there are too many people who operate in their own echo chambers, where when they're not looking at their data, they're not looking at programs that work. They're all ideologically driven. There's not a problem in the city that can't be solved, and there's not a problem in the city that can't be solved in short order if we just close ranks and we come together around policies that have proven to be effective. And things like, for example, in education, like universal prenatal to classroom, from prenatal to 3 is probably the most important time to provide a parent with support in making sure the baby's born healthy and doing the early stimulation, early literacy, numeracy, vocabulary that the kids need. Because by 3 years old, the die is cast. In many respects, the gap begins to appear. Things like lengthening the school day and the school year. So the schools are open, the kids are in safe and secure places, and the kids are given, the schools have enough instructional time to help kids that are struggling to catch up. And in doing things, as I've articulated, like having every high school offering the kids work study, where kids can be exposed to the work world, can be on a job site, in an internship, in an apprenticeship, exposed to working men and women, the best role models, getting part-time jobs. All these things can be game changers. They can be transformational. You just need to have the leadership willing to set aside their personal interests and really make children the priority. I do want to make one point, because you touched on this when you talked about violence in the Black community. And look, you can't be afraid to say it, Black on Black crime. But you mentioned Black women. Do you know that a Black woman constitutes 30% of all the violent crime victims in the city of Chicago? That's 30%. They are 16% of the population. They are 30% of the violent crime victims. And if you are a Black teenager, if you are, if you're, a Black woman, a teenager in Chicago, you are 14 times more likely to be the victim of violent crime than if you're a white teenager, a white female teenager. I mean, that's a crisis.
There's more Black teenagers than white teenagers in Chicago. So I understand what you're saying. I think people they may say, "Oh, who's Paul Vallas talking about?" Paul Vallas, Marc Sims. Go look up CBS2 Chicago, Dorothy Tucker. Great report she did early this year. CBS2 Chicago, right. Dorothy Tucker. Go watch it before you start throwing stones at me and Paul Vallas. Go right ahead and finish up the show. Go ahead.
No, but you're absolutely right. But that's a crisis that we had to deal with. We have a domestic violence crisis. Last year there was 110%. I think it was 110% increase in domestic violence deaths. Last year alone, domestic violence the last 3 years has grown by 16%. So yes, this is a crisis that needs to be done. And since COVID, there's been a 50% increase in school-age youth who have been murdered, and there has been record increases in the number of murders and attempted murders and other violent crimes committed by school-age youth 17 years and younger. So we have a real crisis here, and the schools have got to play a role in dealing with that crisis. So that's why things like longer school day, longer school year, keeping those campuses open to 8 o'clock, bringing these.
You said that a bunch of times. Maybe they've heard you, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, exactly. But that's like things like work study.
Yeah,
and I know I'm being redundant, but those types of things that the district needs to support if we're going to really get at reclaim our youth and ensure that they're safe and secure.
And what's good for Chicago is also good for cities like Philadelphia and New Orleans, everywhere else. Paul Vallas, thank you for being my guest.
Well, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me this morning.